I can read people's thoughts. Everyone, in fact. Every person I meet, I see, I hear, I can read. This, of course, makes me excellent at my hobby. I'm a professional chess player. Having the ability to literally know what your opponent's thinking is quite a trick, really. But that's not what I'm here to talk about. Where's the horror in a cute little ability like that? No, I'm here to talk about something. No, someone far worse. See, ever since I was little, I could read everyone's thoughts. It was an odd thing, too. And the closest I can describe it to is like drinking alphabet soup. You know, tomato soup with alphabet cereal in it. Delicious. Up until last month, I'd been sure of my ability. As soon as I see or hear a person, I gain access to their thoughts, whether they like it or not. Usually, I tend to block out these thoughts by listening to music, or simply ignoring them altogether. But see, last month, I met a man. He was new to the city, and I noticed he moved in across my apartment on the second floor of a rundown flat. I lived on the 5th floor, and from my point of view, I had a simply delicious view into his balcony. The first time I saw him, I thought nothing of it. He looked normal, a young man who seemed to be here for college. Rectangular black glasses, a green sweater, all too boring really. About a week later, he turned up in my chess academy class. It's a small group I assist, but I consistently win against everyone, and the club president usually sets newcomers up against me to show them what real chess feels like. That's how I met him. First opponent of the day. "Kaya Jones," I greeted, extending my gloved hand. "You are?" "Oh, me. Just good old Donald Zoll. I'd say I'm quite average at chess," he introduced. "You?" "Oh, I'm quite the master." That's when the game began, and I realised I couldn't read him. This was impossible. I'd played this exact scenario hundreds, no, thousands of times before. I looked around. I could hear everyone else speak their mind, quite literally. "A problem?" he questioned, vaguely gesturing for me to make the first move. Give me a second," I murmured. I didn't understand. There was no way this was happening. No matter how hard I focused, no matter how hard I calmed myself, I just couldn't read him. The game was over, in a matter of minutes. "Not quite the master, eh?" he joked. "My mind-reading skills must have been off today," I joked. He laughed. I did too. Something wasn't right about this guy. Out of the thousands of people I'd met all across the world, he was the only one I couldn't sense. So I was curious. You couldn't blame me. He was a wild card, something I couldn't control. And now, call me a control freak, but I really don't like things I can't control. The rest of the day, I actually managed to forget about him. I ate lunch, chatted with my good friend Quint Mognis, and went around scamming some people at a funeral, using my ability. Evil, I know, but it works. What can I say? People foolish enough to get scammed deserve to get scammed, but that's a whole other story. That night, as I was out tending to my plants in the garden, I saw him. His balcony had virtually nothing on it but a table and a chair. His door was made of glass, just like mine, and the inside of his apartment was lit, allowing me to see inside. Now, I'm not really into watching people, and take that as you will, but this guy really confused the world out of me. So I watched him. He was in his kitchen, a small little place, waiting for something in the microwave to finish. It then occurred to me he'd been able to see me on the balcony, watching, so I retreated back into the confines of my house, closed the glass door, and turned off the lights. I resumed viewing him, now with binoculars pressed up against the glass. A moment later, his microwave had gone off, and from how intently I was observing, I could practically hear it go off. He reached inside and then pulled out a... No. That made no sense. He pulled out this block of wood. Worse, he took it out with nothing but his bare hands. and I could see that the wood was blacked and smoking, yet he didn't seem to feel the pain. And then he did the weirdest thing. He took a bite out of the wood, and all of a sudden I felt this pain in the back of my head, and the next thing I knew, I was in my room, in my bed. I didn't remember getting there. I didn't remember falling asleep, yet I felt just as rested as usual, and I could see by my alarm clock it was well into the morning. One moment, I was watching that guy Donald, and then awake. "What the?" I murmured. I stood up, got dressed, and went to get a bite from my kitchen, when I saw my binoculars on the floor. I picked them up, and I looked through them again, once more observing Donald's apartment. I couldn't see anything. No lights were on, but something had changed. I could swear that there was a table there yesterday, but now there was only a bright yellow chair. I shrugged it off at first, and then I noticed other things. I didn't remember Donald's balcony having vines wrapped all over it, yet now it did. And the chair, it wasn't made for an adult. It was a child's chair, and I was sure no child lived there. The weirdest part was when I bumped into him while walking outside to my job, where I was a detective. "Hey, Kaya, was it?" Donald greeted. I replied. "Hi. Up for another chess game sometime?" he asked. "Maybe. I'm quite seething over my loss," I smiled sarcastically. With that, we parted ways. Not really. I followed him. Yes, I know. Creepy. But that's just how I am. And besides, that whole eating a block of wood thing, if that was even real, was major creepy. And something seemed off about him, like he wasn't who he said he was. His clothes seemed like they were a part of him. Whenever he breathed, it was like every single article of clothing breathed with him, and his voice, it was so off-key. I still couldn't read his thoughts, and that scared me. His path seemed almost planned out, and all the while, he whistled this tune that I just couldn't recognise. It sounded so familiar, yet I just couldn't place it. It felt like one of those old tunes kids get at daycares, and I was sure I heard it somewhere, but anyway, he eventually went to this dark alleyway, and he turned the corner, and when I did, he was gone. Nothing. There was a garbage can in the distance, and a stray cat batting at some mice, but apart from that, nothing. That's when I noticed the whistling. It was coming from above. I looked up and saw Donald walking up on the rooftop of an apartment, walking forwards towards the streets across the alley. What the hell? I thought, as I watched him. And then I'm not going to sugarcoat it, but he reached the end of the rooftop and jumped. I ran towards the other street, shouting something like, "Are you okay?" or some other generic phrase. But when I got there was nothing to be seen. No body, no whistling, nothing. The trail had gone cold. "Hello?" I shouted. Nobody responded. The rest of the day, I couldn't think of anything but that moment. What the heck was going on? "You okay?" Quint asked, tapping me on the shoulder as I sat at the park, feeding the ducks. "You look a little dazed." "It's the strangest thing," I replied. "I met someone I couldn't read. I couldn't hear his thoughts. Quint Mognis was a friend, my best friend, you could say, and I trusted them enough to tell them about my ability." "That's odd," they murmured, "but I wouldn't think anything of it. Maybe it's just a 1 in a million thing." "But he did something strange," I countered. "He put a piece of wood in a microwave and then ate it." "I'll be sure to look into that." That night, I looked through my window again. The lights weren't there. This was the same for the next week, until Monday, where I could finally observe again. The past week, he'd not been out on a walk either, and I was getting more and more confused. He wasn't there at first. The first odd thing I saw was this plate on the ground. It had this black wooden figurine, like it had been charred or something. It was this statue of an owl, except it wasn't an owl. It had human feet, arms, and well, it had these protrusions coming out of it that seemed oddly familiar. It took me a minute to realise they were teeth. Canine teeth that I'm sure were all very human. Then he came back, dressed in this awful black clothing that was ragged and smoking. Next, he picked up the statue and moved it to this plastic bag in the corner. When he opened the bag, I saw that there were dozens of other charred black statues, just like, all with teeth lodged inside. Then I heard it. That awful whistle, that song, that melody. It was all too familiar, too constant, and I was sure it was coming from him. He wasn't whistling though, just smiling this awfully large smile that was reaching from ear to ear. I don't know what happened next, but the next thing I knew, I wasn't watching him anymore. It was midnight, and he was gone. I'd been watching him at 8 in the afternoon. I don't know why, but something compelled me to look outside, and I saw that Donald's balcony was empty, except for a single figurine placed on a small, kid-sized blue chair that shouldn't have been blue. I heard that melody again, and I was compelled to look downwards, and I saw Donald whistling while taking out a black garbage bag into the street, while smiling that awful smile. And suddenly, I was outside, dragging the black bag away from the street, into my apartment. I don't remember doing this at all, except opening it in my room and finding all these chess pieces inside, except they were all black and covered in teeth. The next day, I cashed in a favour with a friend of mine who worked in a lab. "Hey," she said, a few hours after I sent her the bag. "Where'd you get this?" "I can't tell you that. Sorry, Rengage," I apologised. "It's okay," she decided. "I just want to know why all these chess pieces are covered in 167 canine teeth." "It's for a murder investigation," I lied. "I'll have it sent back to your house then?" she replied, seeing through my lie. "Sure." The pieces never made it back. It apparently got lost in the mail, and stranger still, Stephanie Rengage didn't recall receiving anything from me, nor examining any chess pieces. At the time, when she supposedly called me, CCTV footage had her performing an autopsy on a murder victim. So, if she was doing that, who the hell had called me? I didn't see Donald for another 2 weeks after that. The balcony, I noticed, lost its chair and the wooden statue. Worse, I was having issues sleeping, waking up in a sweat from nightmares I couldn't seem to remember. I was receiving calls from people I didn't know, each one speaking numbers in a monotone voice I could barely understand, as if static covered them. And then I saw him yesterday. I don't know what's going to happen, and I am damn well scared, and I need people to know about this. At 9 in the evening, I got home and had this irresistible urge to look through the window, and there, I saw him. He was just there, staring at a wall, and then, for the first time, I could hear his thoughts. His lips were moving just out of sync with his thoughts, but I could tell his words and thoughts were one of the same. "It will be done." He was in a conversation with someone, something, whatever. "I'll make more for you." His hands fidgeted, and I saw that he held a block of wood. I love doing it. He brought up the wood to his mouth and began chewing on it. The next thought made my skin crawl. "I know they're watching me." And Donald smiled, that awful smile, ear to ear, turned to look at me through my darkened window, right into my eyes, and laughed. I gasped, fell back and landed on the floor. I wasn't seeing him or anywhere near him, yet I could still hear their evil laugh ring through my bones. I looked again, and he was still there, watching, just now, on his balcony, sitting on a teeth-white chair too small for him. I stopped watching, shut the curtains, locked all my doors, and secured my alarm system. When the clock struck midnight, I opened the curtains just a little to look again. He wasn't there, and that's when I almost sighed a sigh of relief. But that's when I heard a loud knock at my door, and that cursed evil laugh rang right through me. I looked through the peephole to see Donald smiling, unblinking, staring right into my eyes. And that's why I'm here, writing this as the laughter gets louder and the knocks intensify. Please, someone out there, save me.